Greetings, friends. This evening, we're going to spend some time with a person who has shaped Christian history more than almost anyone except Jesus of Nazareth himself, and that is the Apostle Paul. For some, Paul is a hero, a brilliant theologian, fearless missionary, and tireless community builder. For others, he's the reason the church has been judgmental, patriarchal, and obsessed with rules. And for many modern readers, especially in progressive circles like our circle, Paul's reputation is very, very complicated. Now, why is this? Well, I think because we've often met him, the Apostle Paul, in verses pulled completely out of context from the New Testament. These verses have been used to silence women, to condemn LGBTQ+ people, or to tell slaves in the biblical text to obey their masters. But here's something crucial. The Paul you've heard in those verses may not actually be the Paul of history. The New Testament contains 13 letters attributed to the Apostle Paul, but scholars have spent over a century studying them very closely. Their vocabulary, their grammar, their theology, and their historical details. And most agree that only 7 of these letters are authentically Paul's own writing. So the book of Romans, 1st and 2nd Corinthians, Galatians, Philippians, 1st Thessalonians, and Philemon. The other 6, including 1st and 2nd Timothy and Titus, were written later by Paul's followers, in his name, and this is important, as was common in the ancient world. Very common for this to happen in the ancient world. These letters often sound more conservative, reinforcing household hierarchies and social norms. And if you've heard Paul sounding oppressive, chances are you've been hearing from these post-Paul writings. Now, when we focus on the authentic letters, we meet a very different Paul. This Paul was a Jewish Pharisee, deeply committed to the Torah, whose life was transformed by what he experienced as a direct encounter with the risen Christ, with the post-Easter Jesus, as we've learned about in past chapters. For Paul, this wasn't about joining a religion or believing in doctrines. It was about entering a whole new reality, one called being in Christ, as the text of the New Testament says. And here's the key. For Paul, this new reality was rooted in grace, not in law. In the Roman Empire, your value was determined by your ethnicity, your gender, your status, your citizenship. For Paul, none of that mattered anymore. None of it. In a very important verse in the New Testament, in Galatians chapter 3, verse 28, so Galatians 3:28, Paul declares, "There is no longer Jew or Greek, slave or free, male or female, for you all are one in Christ Jesus." That's not just nice poetry. Hear this. In a rigidly stratified society, this was a very revolutionary statement to make. Paul's communities were meant to be living examples of this new creation, places where old boundaries lost all of their power. He urged his followers to embody love as the fulfillment of the law, to forgive one another, to bear each other's burdens, and to welcome outsiders as kin, as family, as part of the community. His letters are not so much abstract theological essays, except maybe the book of Romans, which is very theological. They're written to real communities facing real struggles. Sometimes he corrects these communities sharply, other times he pours out gratitude and joy. Now, Borg reminds us that Paul's vision is not about earning God's approval, but trusting that it's already given, and then letting that gift reshape the way we live together. This, I think, is where Paul and Unitarian Universalism can find some common ground. We may not share in his Christology, so the ideas and thoughts and study of who the post-Easter Jesus really was, and we may not share in his exact theological language, but we can affirm his vision of a community where worth is not measured by conformity, where love overrides status, and where justice is the natural fruit of grace. I think that's very Unitarian Universalist, if you ask me. So perhaps the invitation for us today is to read Paul again, not as the rigid moralist some have made him out to be, but as a visionary leader who believed love could create a new humanity. And the question for us, I think, becomes, what would our own new humanity as Unitarian Universalists look like? Here and now. Talk to you guys in a second.